the things that I'm going to run through this week, find my notes. I'm just going to hit a few bullet points. We're going to talk about strategy, the record. We're going to talk a little bit about some fanboy nonsense that goes into betting. That there's a piece there that we should all think about. I'm going to talk about my current no bet list, teams to stay away from, teams that are just a flight risk. We're going to get into some COVID, the reschedules, the coaches, some of the game results and spreads. And then I got a couple games I'm going to break down. I'm not going to take too deep of a dive into the breakdown, but I got a few bullet points for some of the games that were mentioned earlier in the chat and some of the games that I've been thinking of. So that's where we're going to go this week. And, anybody feel free to chime in with questions. I know, Rob, you always have some questions, which is great. So let's go. The strategy piece I want to talk about. I sound like a broken record, and I'm not sorry for that, because I want everybody to understand more than anything that the strategy and the portfolio management is more important than the actual picks. It is far more important. The first time we recorded, which was 6 weeks ago at this point, we broke down the actual strategy. You take your picks for the week, your 9, your 10, your 7, whatever they are, whether they're my picks, they're your picks, they're your dog's picks. You take those picks and you spread your money out evenly. If you're willing to risk $100, you spread it over your 10 picks, your 9 picks evenly, $10 on every game. It's very important to stay there. And if we were following that strategy, if everybody was following the strategy and playing the picks, and we've had some good weeks. I mean, we had a 7-1-1. We've had a couple 6-3s. We bounced back nicely last week after a really ugly college Saturday. But I'm thinking 5-4. That's my thought process every week. 5-4 or 6-5. That's what I'm shooting for. And we caught some weeks that were better than that. But the strategy that was laid out, we picked $10 just because that's an easy number to multiply out. And we picked that, and we said if we stayed to the strategy, we would have taken a cash out every single week, and we would be somewhere around, I think we said a $50 to an $80 better right now. And that was based off of the $10, and that was based off of 5-4. So with some nice winning weeks, that 25% press on all our picks going into the following week should have gotten us closer to the high side of that. So, if you're $100 better, you're betting $800 a game right now. And that's a good place to be. And we're on house money. You should be on house money. It probably doesn't feel that way, but you are, and you should be if you follow that strategy. Very important to stay disciplined and have a plan, because if you don't have a plan, then the no plan becomes your plan, and you just simply don't know what to do. Trust the record. Trust your picks, no matter what goes on throughout the week. Last weekend was a very good example of it. We had a 1-3 Saturday, and it was awful, and it was hard to watch. And God, I had this overwhelming testosterone feeling of failure. But I didn't go back into anything on Saturday. And, then we wake up Sunday to a perfect record. We went 5-0 on Sunday, and that's the baseline. That's the baseline position that we took this week. So the week ended up being 6-3. And if you freaked out and panicked on Saturday, or went and bet a game that wasn't planned for, you might have gone in even further than that. But come Sunday, we go 5-0. Well, now we got a 6-3 week. And that's at minimum, because I'm guessing that everybody on this call went into some live bets, and those live bets, you attack them the same way. You go with the even money. So it ended up being an even better week for me because of some of that live bet that we talk about. So it's very important that you stay with a strategy. If you don't, you just don't have a strategy, and it makes it hard to cash tickets. So the next piece I wanted to get into is I just wanted to talk for a second about Fanboy. I felt I'm on the verge of falling victim to it. A buddy of mine fell horribly victim to it this past week. But we look at these teams, and when I break down teams and games, you get used to a team. It's not even your team. For me, it's not the Chiefs, it's not the Bears. It's just, for me right now, it's Coastal Carolina. I absolutely love this team. They've covered spreads when they shouldn't have. They've scored points. They're like a cash register. Last night's game, I won 6 different ways on that game, none of which were none of which was a pregame position. I'm not going to touch Coastal Carolina for at least 2 weeks because I'm starting to become a fan. And so now my judgment on that team is impaired. A buddy of mine fell into the same hole with Florida. I think I may have to some extent because Florida I thought was better than what they showed last week. But if you find yourself starting to really like a team that's not your team because they've covered for you a couple times, well, they're going to punch you in the face. Seattle went into last week and they had covered every single spread. When they lost one, they burned us. So be careful the teams that you fall in love with because this is sports investing. This is not being a fan. That doesn't do it for you, and it's why you typically should stay away from your team because you can overstate the value of some of the players. We good, Rob? You got anything you want to add to any of that before I move on to what's next?
No, go ahead. You're doing good.
So the next one I want to talk about now, I'm going to pull out some stats, and again, this is a broken record thing for me, but I'm going to talk about the teams that are on my no bet list, and I will stand against these teams always, no matter what. In college, some of you can probably guess them, but in college, TCU, Notre Dame, K-State, and Oklahoma. Those teams have played 18 games this year. Of those 18 games, there's only been 3 favorite win and covers. We got 4 favorite no covers. We got 4 favorite losses, and then we got 3 dog wins. We talked about Notre Dame last week, and again, I'm not against Notre Dame. I'm not against any of these teams. I just won't. They're not a safe place to put an investment. But Notre Dame last week, it was a perfect example. They will win and cover when it comes to them. If they don't, they won't. TCU, K-State, they're all over the place. They're a favorite. K-State a favorite by 11, and they lose the game, and it just doesn't make sense on any of these teams. I won't bet on them. I'm happy to break the game down for anybody that sends me a message or posts it on the group. I'll break the game down and just take that approach of stats and giving you information if you're interested in those games. But I would always advise staying away from them. The other team, we go to the NFL, the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys, they have gone 0-5 against the spread this year. And not only that, it's even uglier with Dallas. They've had, I'm trying to find it in my notes. They've had 2 favorite no covers. They've had 2 favorite losses and 1 dog no cover. So they're a bad favorite. They're a terrible favorite. And this past Cowboy game, they were a 7.5 point favorite against the Giants, which plays into another one of my sins is these NFC East matchups. Cowboys, Giants. It's usually 50-50 down the middle who even wins, let alone the win and not cover. But Dallas goes up against a division opponent, 7.5 point favorite, and wins. I think they won by 1 or 2, and they won by a field goal in the closing section. But Dallas, stay away from them. They haven't covered a spread. Who knows what that team is? Every year they got a roster that's assembled by all kinds of free agents and high risk personality type guys. They got a new coach this year. Now they got a washed up quarterback that's filling in. Half the team is crying because they lost Dak Prescott, and Dallas is their risk to me. If you're thinking about any Dallas game, I would recommend staying away from them. Unless you're going to bet against them, you can bet against Dallas. You probably got a good argument there because they haven't covered a spread. That being said, they'll probably win and cover the spread this week because that's kind of the pattern. I take these.
I was going to actually ask you about that. So the teams that you say don't bet on, right?
Yeah.
Is that it's not I guess, a pass to bet against them?
Well, yes, you could take that approach. The Dallas being 0-5 against the spread. I mean that's just a number that I'm putting up. It's a true number, but I'm putting it there so that my point becomes measurable. The non-measurable part to all these teams is Dallas. I just said it all. There's weird emotion in that team. There's something in that owner's box that carries down to the teams and causes them to perform at odd times and not show up when they should. And that's just a broken team to wager on. And I sound like a fantasy guy right now. People last year thought that Jameis Winston was the second best quarterback in football because of his fantasy stats, and I think Dallas is the worst team in football because they haven't covered a spread. So that's my geeky fantasy thing. But this is how I make my money. But you're right, Rob. A team that hasn't covered in the past, they might be due for a cover. But with these college teams, uh, there's so many performances where Notre Dame, great example. If it happens, if it comes to them, they win. If not, they're happy just running the ball, killing the clock. If they break a 40-yard run, well, great, we scored a touchdown. But they're perfectly happy to take it all the way down to the 2-yard line, kick their little field goal, and that's what these teams typically do. Um, and I don't know what it is about K-State, but they show up in weird games, and they don't when they don't. If you look at who they've beaten this year and who they've lost to, there's no sense to be made of it. And I realize that on this list, I'm talking about Big 12 teams. I mean, I'm talking about uh, TCU, K-State, and Oklahoma, which pretty much means I'm not safe investing in the Big 12, which is those are good teams, typically teams that are in the playoffs, but it's for different reasons. If you look at just against the spread and the cover, no cover, Rob, you got a point. They're probably due. Seattle was due for a loss last week. They were due to not cover because they had covered every spread. So
Do you not read the text?
what?
No, you're good. You're good.
All right.
Crazy girl in my apartment.
All right. Well, I don't. I feel like I'm about to get reprimanded. That sounded like an upset situation. All right.
No,
And
you're
just
good.
and just to beat another dead horse, we're gonna talk Monday night, Sunday night, Thursday night COVID games because I keep updating these. So Monday night games, a little bit better than the rest. 3 favorite covers, 2 dog covers, and 2 dog wins, outright wins by dogs. Sunday night is the riskiest one of all. Sunday night, 1 favorite cover, 1 dog cover, and 3 dog wins. Thursday night, 1 favorite cover, which was the Chiefs, who had an entire offseason to prepare for a team that lost their coach. There's been 1 dog cover, 2 dog wins, and then there was a pick'em win. So that one doesn't really count because there was no true spread in that game. And then if we look at these COVID reschedule games, there's only been 2. It's been I'm sorry, there's been 3. The Chiefs, they won and covered. Tennessee this past Tuesday won as a dog, and then Pittsburgh won as a favorite. So there's no true pattern in these rescheduled COVID games. I think that they probably ended up true to form, but I'm going to switch gears and get into some of the COVID. What we've seen off of Tennessee and Pittsburgh both, I said last week I would not want to bet against Pittsburgh, and they were forced into a bye week. They come out totally healthy, ready to go. They controlled possession. Their D played incredible, and they got a nice win. Granted, it was against Philadelphia, but they still came out firing, and they look great. You look at Tennessee, and we last week even touched on Tennessee with some of their COVID and how the coaching would change over. They had 16 days of rest or quarantine, and they came out and they beat an undefeated Buffalo team. They stopped the rush, and they picked off a quarterback that hadn't been picked off all season. Say what you want, but this Buffalo quarterback statistically is a top 3 in the league right now, and he's not throwing picks. So at this point, what we've learned about COVID and reschedule and teams forced into the bye. Now, granted, the teams that have been forced to change schedules, we're talking about 3 really good coaches. Well, you can question if Mike Vrabel's a great coach, but you got Andy Reid, you got Mike Tomlin, and then you got Mike Vrabel. And to tell you the truth, what Mike Vrabel did against Bill Belichick and that genius strategy of running down the clock, taking penalties, just doing what he did to the Patriots last year, that's a good coaching move. So I mean, you got 3 pretty good coaches that have been forced into the extra bye. So I don't know that has a true effect on the NFL. College, we're about to find out this weekend. I mean, we're truly about to find out this weekend with Alabama and what that effect is. The spread, we were talking a few weeks ago about the what a player is worth in a point spread. And I think then I even mentioned in college the coach is probably worth something. Well, the spread was 6.5, and it's down to 4.5, depending on where you look. And there's a ton of action on Georgia right now. Tons of action. But you look at this Alabama coaching staff, and I really I mean, I'll just expand a little bit as to why I'm staying with that Alabama pick this week. I still even like it at the 6.5, but Alabama, they have head coaches on staff, former head coaches on staff. So Steve Sarkisian, he wasn't the greatest head coach. He was just a notch above 500, but this man was an offensive coordinator for a Super Bowl team, and he's not the one that lost that Super Bowl with that whole Atlanta 28-3. But Sarkisian was the O coordinator on that team. He was a head coach at USC. He was a head coach at Washington, and he's now driving the bus in Alabama. They got another head coach on staff by the name of Major Applewhite. This guy, as a head coach, he is averaging 309 yards passing per game and 38 points per game. Very high-powered offensive mind. He sits on this team as a consultant. I don't know that he's going to be wearing the headset calling plays this weekend as the O coordinator, but the man is still on staff, and Bama's offense has been on fire. I don't trust the Georgia quarterback very much. I love Bama in this position because I think out of most teams, they're the best set to absorb the loss of even St. Nick. So, Rob, to what you were talking about, the deep dive into COVID. Yes, COVID's had an effect, and there's talk of it, and it's around us. But the games we've seen so far, it's actually had a positive effect on these teams. Tennessee came back firing, Pittsburgh came back firing, and I think that this weekend Bama is going to come back firing. It might have something to do with the coaching, but nonetheless, COVID has not hurt any of the picks. So if you any of you that are out there and looking at games and going the other way because you see some type of COVID mishap, I would caution you that that's not necessarily the right reasoning to walk away. I mean, if you walk away from a game, walk away. That's the most powerful move you have. Rob said it last week, but don't walk away strictly because of COVID. Walk away because you've dug in and you found some other reasoning there.
Yeah, well, let me give you some insight on why I think that is. So I think the reason why the COVID doesn't, or it's not really hurting them, is one, they're young and healthy. Most of the people that I was watching a report today, it said they're asymptomatic anyways. They're just testing positive and they're young and healthy, so they're bouncing back. But then the rest of the team gets an extra week or a few days, for the game. So I think they're more rested and they do well. So it
Which
might be something to that.
I think that there is something to it. I think you're 100% right. Now, there might be a different something to it when the COVID actually happens to a poorly coached team. If the COVID deal happened to the Jets, it's, not in the top 5 head coaches. If that were to happen to them, I think it would be interesting to see how he controls his team on an unexpected quarantine. There's a handful of other teams out there with less experienced head coaches, and if they went through some COVID, I don't know that I'd be as confident in those teams. But as of right now, what we have in front of us, you're right. It gives the rest of the team a chance to rest. And I'm sure that they're on Zoom calls and they're still breaking down film and they're still doing some type of workout in a protected environment. So the COVID effect has been minimal, other than the inconvenience to us. But truthfully, having a football game on Tuesday night, that's not inconvenient to me. And I just approach that the same way that I approach a Monday night game. I don't touch it. I just leave it alone. I've been watching these. I watched the Tuesday night game, and I watched the first couple plays, the first few minutes. And if there's an opportunity there, well, we do what we do in the stock market. We buy a dip, or we buy a call or a put, and we go there, and you could pick up a couple bucks.
Yeah, I agree. Sounds good, man.
So I'm going to get into a couple games, just some bullet points on games. Some of you might be surprised at my Jets pick, and the reason that I really like the Jets this week is, to start with, it's 9.5 points. I mean, that's too many. I mean, there's a 9.5 point spread to me. That's Patrick Mahomes. That's Aaron Rodgers. That's Russell Wilson, although I don't trust Russell Wilson's defense. And that's Lamar Jackson. to some extent, depending on the opponent, Lamar Jackson. Those are the 4 quarterbacks that everybody on this call has my blessing to take a hard look at with a 9.5 point spread. There's only another handful that I even trust with 7. 6.5 is different than 7, but you just start right there, and I'm on the Jets side of things. But then they've been close. They've been in games. They have not gotten truly destroyed. They're getting really good quarterback play. And then here's the biggest thing is they're going against a Miami team who just hung 42 points on San Francisco, and take it or leave it on San Francisco. I'm not prepared to lay claims as to what I think San Francisco is at this point, but what I saw on the field last week was a quarterback that wasn't fully recovered from an ankle, threw picks left and right, got pulled from the game. There's locker room turmoil there, and I don't believe in conspiracy and things like that, but there is something true to the Super Bowl hangover and that team not even making the playoffs the following year. And thus far, San Francisco is proving that to be correct. So that's the team that Miami beat 42-17. Now Miami's traveling all the way from San Francisco back home, and they're going to get a division opponent that is a 9.5 point dog. I'm not saying the Jets win, although they're due for a win. The teams don't lose every single game, but I don't think the Jets are playing bad defense, and I certainly don't think that quarterback has anything to worry about. I think that he's playing much better than the team he has around him, and the teams that the Jets have played have certainly been much better than the teams that Miami has played. So for that, without getting into stats and the X's and O's, that's why I picked the 0-5 Jets to cover a spread. I mean, the Jets they've played some tough teams. They played Buffalo. They played the Colts, which at that point was the best defense in football. They played against Denver, and then they played against Arizona. They're coming off a game against Arizona, and that's a high-powered offense. So I love the Jets there. There was a question about the SMU game. The SMU game, I threw that up there as an appetizer because these standalone games are high risk, but I'll keep it simple. SMU's quarterback, Shane Buechele, was a starter for Texas at one point. He transferred. He's playing out of his mind. He's got 10 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. He's running the ball a little bit too. They got a really good running back, and they've controlled some high-powered offenses, and please don't laugh at me when I tell you the 2 high-powered offenses, but they've beaten North Texas and they've beaten Memphis, and these are not marquee teams. This is not Alabama or USC or teams that we all really care to watch, but within their opponents and their schedule, those offenses are very hard to stop. So that alone, I like SMU. It's 6.5. I think that should cover. I'm going to put a small upfront investment on it, but I think you watch the game there. It might run away from you, but SMU, just on the quarterback play and how they've been able to shut down good offenses, I think that's a safe one. The next one I went a little bit further into was BYU against Houston. BYU would normally be on my don't touch list. BYU has covered some spreads this year, but it's hard for me to understand why, because I usually don't deep dive into BYU. And again, this isn't one of my picks. I think Andrew put this up and asked about it. In that particular game, I like Houston in the 5 points. So again, this is not one of my plays, but if I'm going to give advice on it, I would say look at Houston. This head coach, Dana Holgorsen, is an offensive juggernaut, and he is. Last year is not a representation of what Houston can be. They're getting 5 points, but this coach can light it up. This is going to be one of the times that BYU doesn't cover. Dana Holgorsen, as a head coach, is averaging 563 yards a game and 42 points. That's as a head coach. And a lot of those bigger numbers happened last year when he was coaching Houston. And a lot of the players sat last year. He lost a quarterback to a transfer, but Houston's only played 1 game this year and they won it. And so I would take the points in Houston, and I would even put an even bet on Houston in the money line. I don't think BYU has beaten very many teams. And again, I haven't broken down BYU, but I know this Houston team and this coach very well. And I would lean towards that on this particular game. There was another question about the Auburn and the South Carolina. I don't trust either team. I mean, it's just plain and simple. I don't trust either team. Didn't give it a look. You could probably form an argument on both sides, but at this point, those teams don't deserve my oxygen, or at least any amount of my effort to try and figure out which one of these two teams that's going to go 500 this year is going to actually win a game this particular weekend. I think both teams are they're not really going to go anywhere. They're not going to be in a conversation to win a conference championship, and um, I'm not going to dive in deep to a game like that and break down two division opponents conference opponents that are, they're just going to rough each other up, and somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. And I don't think I could, even if I spent 2 hours, I don't think I could build an argument for either side. I don't think either head coach is great. It is what it is there. What else, Rob? What are you thinking? You still being reprimanded? Anybody else out there?
No, I'm good. I didn't get yelled at. I had to mute it. All right. So, thoughts on the Dodgers game tonight?
So I don't know baseball, but this is awesome because one of the guys that's here traveling with me, he the dude knows baseball, and he last night I said, "Hey, are the Dodgers going to win by 15?" And he said, "No way. Hell no, they're not going to win by 15." So I took 15 and a half. And I'm sitting in a OTB watching horse racing and Coastal Carolina game, and he said, "No, hell no." Well, then the spread changes, and I'm like, "What about 14 and a half?" He said, "No, take that too." And I ended up cashing on a baseball game, which is very uncharacteristic for me, but it was fun, and the dude is right. He also called the Astros winning last night too. So without talking to my trusty consultant, um, I don't really know what to say, but the Dodgers looked great last night. One would think that would carry over. I don't know baseball. I don't watch baseball. It's not exciting to me, although it was a nice change of pace from all the football to watch baseball these last couple of days. But I don't know. I would say let the game get started, because that's what made me a winner yesterday. The game got started. I look up, and I would do this with any sport. Football, baseball, basketball, any sport. I can tell you countless times in the last couple of months, Muhammad, he's on this call. Him and I are exchanging messages, and the Lakers are down by 15, and we're like, just take them. Just take them. Just take the points. Lakers losing by 15. So, somebody goes up by 3 runs or 2 runs even, I would take a good hard look at the other guy. In football, if the dog goes up by 10, great. You just got yourself the best bonus imaginable, because now you're going to get a money line bet on a team that was probably a 7 or an 8 point favorite just by them going down first.
All right. Muhammad actually has any change with Saban out?
What was it?
Any change with Saban out, even if the offensive coordinator is a former head coach?
They got 2 head coaches on that roster, but no, I'm not changing anything. I still stand behind the 6.5 that I liked earlier in the week. Saban is fantastic, but you got to think that by Wednesday, he's already installed his game plan, and the team's already been practicing to it. I wouldn't be surprised if they had the plan for Georgia 2 weeks ago, because that game typically that game is typically for the SEC. So, and it looks like it's going to be the same this year. But the Georgia head coach came from Bama. Nick Saban can finish his sentences. They've come close, but they haven't beat him. And typically, the way these Alabama big games go, and Alabama's already played 2 ranked games this year and won big. Their last 2 games were against ranked opponents. They beat Tennessee, I think it was 44-21. They beat Auburn by 2 or 3 touchdowns. So they've already been in these ranked on ranked games. But where I stand in the Bama Georgia, Bama typically they'll let a team stay alive and give us a good chance to get some short odds. They might even go down by 7, but then they do this really crazy thing, like in the middle of the third quarter, and they just start smothering them. They just start running, and then they one of those runs that's supposed to be just to kill the clock busts free, and they get a touchdown, and then they come back and they get a pick 6, and that's typically how these Bama big games finish. But at this point, last week we talked about Heisman predictions. At this point, I'm throwing the Alabama running back into the picture. And under Saban, Alabama has had 2 Heisman running backs to come out of his program. So this guy could be the next one. Najee is the real deal running back. This guy runs like a beast. But I mean, if you look at Georgia, they beat A&M 52-24. Bama, I don't remember what Bama did against A&M, but they beat Mizzou, and they actually, I'm looking at the wrong thing. I'm sorry. I'm not changing anything. To sum it all up, I'm not changing anything. I like Bama in the game. I love Bama in the game. I like the 6.5. It's a bonus that we're getting 4.5. I love it even more if Georgia comes out and scores first, and then we can catch Bama on a money line that might pay plus 130. In fact, that's what I'm going to be looking for more than anything. But I don't know. What's the head coach on the sideline doing? The coordinators are running the show. I mean, so now you got Sarkisian deciding go for it or kick the field goal. But I think that game plan is already installed.
All right, next one's thoughts on taking Bama to win the division. Odds are plus 130, and I have Tampa to win the whole thing, and I got them also in the division too. So.
Wait, you're talking about 2 different things. You're saying Bama, which is college, and you're saying Tampa, which is NFL.
This is the next question. I'm moving on.
Okay,
I thought taking Tampa to win the division.
I thought you said Bama. I love it. I love the play. I don't think Tampa's going to win this week, but it's not going to take 12-4 to win that division. I think 10-6 probably does it. So, yeah, I do like Tampa. Who's in that division that's really going to contest that? The Saints don't look very good at all, and that's normally the team. Atlanta, they're not really going to put up much fight, and Carolina doesn't look bad, but. There's a 3-way tie at the top right now. That'll separate itself. Tampa's going to go down to 3-3 this week, so you're probably going to have a little bit of a dip where you could buy that. But I really like Tampa's schedule. They got to play the Chiefs, but they get out of this Packers. They go Raiders, Giants, Saints. That Saints is a revenge game. Then they get the Panthers. So out of these next 5 games, I see 4 wins. And then they finish the season, they go into Thanksgiving time. The Rams is going to be a tough one that they'll probably lose. They're probably going to lose the Chiefs game, but then they finish the season with Falcons twice, Vikings, Lions. So, I mean, I see an easy 7 to 9 more wins for them, and it's not going to take that much to win the division. So I think you're safe there.
All right, Le'Veon Bell to the Kansas City Chiefs, huh?
Is that official, or is that just a talking point?
I don't know. It just came out.
Well, last I saw, it was narrowed down to 2 teams. It was the Chiefs, and there was the Chiefs, and there was one other. It was either
no, this was just like a question, I think.
Oh well, there was a alert I got from CBS Sports that said Dolphins or Chiefs is where it is right now. I don't know who's coming up with this because the Chiefs are a well-run organization. They don't run their mouths and leak family business like that. But if he went to the Chiefs, that'd be pretty great because I think that the Chiefs really struggle with the run game. Their defense isn't going to change by getting Le'Veon Bell, but if there's a very small list of head coaches that could handle that type of an attitude in a locker room. But if he comes to Kansas City with any type of garbage like that, he'll get cut real quick in less than 2 weeks. That's just, I mean, they cut their star running back who's lighting it up in Cleveland right now. They cut him because he lied to the team, and there's a lot more to that situation. I'm not going to get into it, but they don't play games. They cut Peters a couple years ago, one of the top interception DBs in the league. So Andy Reid doesn't play games. So if he comes in and he works, that'd be fantastic.
All right, that's all I got. And you did officially, we'll get it on recording. You did offer to take me to a game next year, so That'd be
I'm-
pretty cool. That'd be pretty cool to see.
I'll have the tickets. You just got to get yourself to KC and make sure your liver is healthy and well trained for it, because that Arrowhead tailgating is just, and we go to the Bud Tent, so you can walk up and say, "I'd like 9 beers, please," and don't open them because we're shotgunning, and they'll just do it.
Yeah, it says confirmed.
It is confirmed.
Yeah,
So Le'Veon Bell is officially a Chief.
that's what it says on here. This is the people talking on the question. So.
Well, I mean, go Chiefs. Go Chiefs. That's pretty damn cool. So, all right, guys, feel free to send me messages throughout the week. Anything that comes up. If I didn't touch on the games or pick the games that you want, I'm happy to share any type of insight to these games. And I'm certainly not here to tell you what to play or how to play. I just want to offer some type of strategy behind it and give you a little bit of what I think. And some of your questions and some of the questions I get from you guys throughout the week are fantastic, because it makes me think about something that I hadn't thought about, and I usually get smarter by diving in deeper to something else. So please keep them coming.
Is the Bama Georgia line going to change, you think?
Well, it already did. It started at 6.5, and then it took a drop to 4. And the last I looked, it was 4.5. And I'm going to look it up again to see where it sits. And I'll even tell you where all the public money and where all the betting is right now. But I think that there's going to be a good chunk of sharp money that goes into that game tomorrow. It's 4.5 right now, and the betting it looks like it's pretty even, although the public is a little bit heavier on Georgia, but the odds haven't moved. If sharp money hits Bama, it's probably going to go up to 5, depending on how much. If sharp money hits Georgia, which I hope that doesn't happen, just for the sake of sharps know what they're doing. But if a bunch of sharp money hits Georgia, the spread will probably go down, or the odds and payoff will shift dramatically. I don't know the total that's wagered on this game. I don't have access to that information, but I like to think that my money is sharp money, but I'm certainly not putting $1 million on games.
All right, man. Let's wrap it up then. That's it, huh?
Have a good week. Stay positive and test negative, fellas.